maybe vintage lenses should just stay on vintage cameras and then not. It is too tempting not to try old lenses in between, because in modern times we want modern cameras, digital cameras with high performing lenses, but there is something fun with taking an old lens from another type of camera and adding it to a modern digital camera. And this will be the topic today, using old vintage lenses on new cameras. I bought this Nikkor here with a bunch of lenses before this summer, and during the summer I have a few times taken that lens over to my Sony camera here, because it has an EVF viewfinder so I can see what I'm doing. Because if I put it on my Leica M9, I have no idea where the sharpness will be, because it simply doesn't adapt to that camera. And to adapt it to this Sony A7R II, this is the older model of the R7 series, because I don't need all those megapixels. I don't need 60 megapixels for that type of lens, because that type of lens doesn't cope with 60 megapixels. It's simply too much for it. It isn't built for it. It is built for film, and this high resolution in the digital age is too much for it if you are pixel peaking, which I am not. But I have put it on my 41 megapixel camera here, the a little bit older Sony R7 II series here, because that will perform well on that. But before we look at the shots I did with that, I'll just let you know that this is a lens for a full frame camera, not a smaller sensor type. It has to be adapted to that to make full use of it. And with vintage lenses also comes the possibility of having distortions, colors that are not perfect, because it's an old lens. It is almost as old as me. It was produced during the 1970s. I'm from 63. You can do the math, but I was a little boy at that time. And I think, oh boy, that's a great thing to do. Pick up an old lens, adapt it to a different camera. And lenses belongs to the camera types they are built for. But anyway, it makes a fun play with old lenses that gives a different expression. And it will never be perfect, it will be unperfect, and that's the purpose with it. So if I want perfect pictures, I'll use my Leica M9 with a Summilux lens, or another lens adapting to the Leica M series. If I want a perfect picture for Sony, I take a Sony lens and put it on there. They are built to stay together. But doesn't matter. If you think it a little bit more artistically, you can do whatever you want. You can adapt different lenses and see what happens. The only thing you have to be aware of, that a Nikkor lens doesn't fit a Sony camera, as it doesn't fit a Leica M camera, depending on what it is, because you can use adapters. But the Leica M9 doesn't have an EVF, electronic viewfinder. The Sony camera have, therefore I put it on there, else I wouldn't know where the sharpness was, because the rangefinder camera there have a mechanical system that doesn't let you see what actually happens, because to be able to put this on another camera, I have to use an adapter, which is a kind of middle part that fits the lens here, and then the other diameter for the actual camera, which means there are no direct connection for the Leica M9 that can use that manual focusing system. But with the EVF viewfinder here, I can turn on the camera and I can look in the screen or at the flip screen here at the back. And there I will know what happens. The thing with the Nikkor lens here is this old lens is actually quite famous, and I got it from a friend, a full collection of old Nikkor cameras with different lenses. But this 55mm lens from Nikkor at aperture or f-stop 1.2 gives me a very narrow depth of field and a very narrow margin of failure. It is so easy to misfocus with this type of lens, but it is also fun to play with, and when you hit it, it gives you a special character and a special vintage feeling about the images, although it's put on a digital camera from modern times. Of course, you can shoot on film and it will fit very well if you have a Nikkor camera like this one, actually with the inscription HP Nikkor, because there was a guy once that bought this camera and had his inscription in here with his name on, so it kind of lives with that. And it is a beautiful but also extremely heavy camera, and the lenses are heavy. Also, the 55mm lens here is really heavy, but it turns smoothly still. It has not been cleaned. It looks perfect when I look through it. So if you buy old lenses like this, be sure there are no scratches, and especially that there are no fungus inside here, because then you are in problems if you can't clean it yourself. There are ways to do that, but be careful, or leave it to a professional. But check it for fungus, and you could do that by simply taking the lens off the camera, holding it up to the light, and look carefully through it, up against the light, up against the dark background, having hard light to the glass here, so you can see if there are any dots, speckles, scratches, whatever it could be. On here there even is a protection filter, also an old piece sitting on here, but as good as new, I will say. No scratches, nothing. It's running smoothly. And sometimes you can also see some small oil dots in there if it has been cleaned at some time. This can be the failures in such a lens. The other failures is what we want, the imperfectness in the lens. When it makes the bokeh, the out of focus area, looking a little bit more lively than it does on the Sony lens here, which is a little bit more modern lens, not the newest version, but a very beautiful lens. But on the Nikkor lens here, you have that a little bit more busy bokeh, especially when you shoot wide open. And the only reason to use this lens for me is to shoot it wide open, with all the difficulties, with all the challenges that comes with, because if you only have this really fine, hairy, thin focus area like the Noctilus from Leica, which you only have that hair thin but very beautiful depth of field if you shoot wide open. So I do that, else there's no reason to use that lens. Then I would use another one. I want that very dreamy expression from that lens. The other thing is there can be some aberration, there can be some miscoloring. All of that you can adjust some in Lightroom or Capture One, whatever you use, but in my mind I try not to overdo the correction there, because I'm exactly using that lens because of the failures, because of the personality, because of the expressions it gives. So if I seek something perfect, I would change and go to a modern lens, a newer lens, where I want that more sharp, more accurate colors I will get with that different glass. The thing is, the coatings are different on different cameras. On the Sony here, the coating does that it's contrasty, the colors are more contrasty, where on the Nikkor lens here and the Nikon lens, it will be smoothed out more, especially if you're shooting up against the light and get some flare. Flare is when the light hits the lens directly and makes some distortion in the lens with light. So you can see that flare softens of the image. It can be ugly as, sorry my language, hell, and it can be as beautiful as you want it. And when you're shooting with a EVF camera, electronic viewfinder, you can immediately see what happens. If you put that lens on a camera that have no viewfinder and hope for the best with the focus, then I will not be able to see the flare. And I cannot see the flare even with the Sony here, because that is a rangefinder, so you just look through a piece of glass. You actually do not see the electronic picture as you do with the EVF. I just see a clear window here, so I don't know how the flare works unless I check it on my screen and use time on that after each shot. And actually, I don't want to do that. I will use my time focusing on the subjects and not what happens. But with the EVF viewfinder, you will see immediately what happens, as you can do on other cameras with electronic viewfinders. But the case is that I love that vintage old feeling that this lens gives me. It has a special color character, and the mood is what I'm going for. I'm not going for perfection, I'm actually going for the imperfect image. That brings it to life. For certain things you can do that, for street photography and especially portraits. This 55mm lens, and why it is a 55mm lens and not a 50mm lens, I don't know. Probably because of the technical difficulties in the 1970s to make a lens with all that light getting through a very fast lens going down to f.1.2. That's a little faster than the 1.4 here, and you can see it, but you can also easily miss focus. Even with the EVF viewfinder, it's actually quite difficult to see if I nail the focus. So I take 1, 2 or 3 shots of each subject, and if I just move a little bit, that will change where the focus area is. So if you would want to be sure to have sharp pictures, then go to f-stop 2.8 or even up to 5.6, which is the ideal aperture with this lens. Also an ideal aperture with the Leica, but I can see there is more vignetting on and failures on the older lens than the newer one when I compare them, which actually doesn't make sense to compare because it's 2 different eras, 2 different times they were built for, with different technology and with different knowledge. So I only go for the old lens to have that look that is a little distorted, that is a little off, because that's the beauty in it. So if you don't like that type of pictures, then don't use old vintage lenses, but you can get them for Nikkor for a relatively reasonable price. And I think I was over lucky, if you can say that in English. I was extremely lucky with the price for this set, with this set of cameras and lenses. There also is a 50mm 1.4, there is a wide angle lens, and a zoom lens I will never use. I don't use zoom, I prefer the fixed lenses and just zoom with my feet, moving back and forwards to get the right framing. But I actually like that lens for the fun of it, for the play of it. And if I have a special task, I am a professional photographer, and there I would never use it, because there I need, as a photojournalist, to have something that nails it every time. So it's not the time to be an artist when I'm on my job, but it's time to be an artist in my spare time, where I am an amateur when I am shooting for myself. But of course also as a professional, when I teach at street photo workshops, I can use that lens because that's more free, that's more playful. So I also hope you will sign up for the channel here, subscribe below and subscribe for my newsletter. Follow that and my website, where you can read more about my workshops and bring whatever camera you have. I am a Leica photographer normally, but I also shoot Sony and now also with Nikkor lenses. So follow that and sign up for that. There are links below in the text. So I went out, took a few shots with a Nikkor lens here, both for some portraits and for some street photography, and you will see in the pictures how they behave very differently than, I will not say normal lenses, but standard lenses, you can say, that have higher contrast because of their coating. This is an old lens, and that makes it look sometimes a little odd in colors, which you can love or hate. You can correct them, or you can actually just use them as they are, because many presets for Lightroom and Capture One tries to mimic some of that vintage era there. So why not use the real thing if you can get hold on older lenses? Of course, if you have a Leica camera, you can find older original Leica lenses for that. But in this case, I just wanted to use that Nikkor lens because I was offered this set of lenses and cameras. So it would be plain stupid not to make use of it and have some fun with it, even if it's paired with a camera that it doesn't belong to. But original lenses belongs to the original cameras they are built for. There's a reason they are built like they are. It's not coincidence. But the coincidences you get when you switch your cameras with other lenses gives you a lot of playfulness and something artistic to play around with. In black and white, some of these characters disappears because the colors are different, but all the bokeh and the softness and all the distortions on whatever characters this lens have stay the same. It's just the colors that disappear when you turn it into black and white. I normally shoot both RAW and JPEG, so I use, especially on my Leica, the JPEGs to see immediately the expression it gives me in black and white, although I may think in color at the moment. So I have both versions afterwards, and on the Leica M9 here, it produces some really beautiful, straight out of the camera JPEGs, where the Sony is a little different. I'm not so pleased with the Sony JPEGs, neither color or black and white, so I use the RAW files and convert them to what I want afterwards. But the lens, fantastic to work with, a heavy clump of steel and glass, which shows it is very well built, so it is heavier than the M9 here when I walk the streets, but fun to have with me and fun to play with.